People in our own backyards are hurting. There are insecurities around food, economics, mental health, access to justice, healthcare, and our society continues to become more divisive. But there is hope. Right here in Chicagoland, there are people and organizations who are on the front lines working to bring about positive and transformative change. Each week, we're going to meet some of these agents of change and examine how they are spurring innovative ideas and finding solutions to push our society forward in a more just direction. I'm Sufyan Sohel, and this is Change Agents.
Good evening. A 2021 investigative report by ABC 7 Chicago found that students of color were far more likely to be suspended or expelled than white students. While this may not be surprising due to Chicagoland's historic and current racial inequities, this report also cited 2018 U.S. Department of Education data that showed that Black students in Metro Chicago miss school days due to disciplinary action at a rate 6 times higher than white students. Tonight, we will learn about and discuss restorative justice and the models used by Alternatives, an organization that has been a leader in shaping restorative justice in schools since the late 1990s. What is restorative justice? It's grounded in the ancient idea that having individuals get a real sense of how they are connected and belong while addressing their needs and building their skills, which can be more powerful and effective in creating a more healthy and safe community, more so than relying on fear of punishment. In a study by the Annie Casey Foundation, both the young people who have committed harm and the people they've harmed benefit from participating in the restorative justice process. Only 18.4% of young people who had participated in restorative justice programs had committed another delinquent act 1 year later. This rate rose to 32% among young people whose cases were processed through traditional punitive systems. To help us make sense of all of this and to share the incredible work of her organization, Alternatives, we have with us their brilliant executive director, a bilingual, first-generation Salvadorian Mexican-American who is passionate about dismantling systemic racism and advocating for trauma-informed care and restorative justice programming for our Black and Brown youth. I'm so pleased to welcome tonight, Bessie Alcantara. Bessie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Bessie, I just gave a lot of rhetoric about restorative justice. I hope you were able to follow along. I had a little bit of difficulty, and I can imagine our viewers are probably trying to get their head around the importance of restorative justice practices. But taking a few steps back, I'd like to dig deeper into the why and how our Black and Brown students are more impacted and deal with some of these situations where they're penalized and held accountable more than maybe their white counterparts. Can you share about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a huge question. It's racism, right? We've noticed it even in training. Implicit bias is a very real thing and how it shows up. And the studies show that kids as young as in preschool, Black kids in preschool can see higher rates of suspension and discipline. And so it starts at a really early age. And it's something to be aware of. I don't think as a society, we still have a really good way to train around implicit bias. It's one of those things I think for adults is really shameful to acknowledge. I may have some bias that puts a group of folks at a disadvantage. And if we can't reconcile that conversation, then it becomes a very difficult topic to tackle.
Sure, and then thank you for that frame. And then, but if it's happening as early as preschool, I can only imagine it snowballing and escalating more as they go into middle school and high school.
Yeah, and the studies also show that we tend to interpret Black youth in particular as older than they are. And we saw that with Tamir Rice, where people thought that that was an adult and not a 12-year-old child, right? Police officers when they killed him. And so we're noticing that same pattern with young people in elementary school and in high school, where they're dehumanized and treated in such a way that people forget that they're children.
Is that what resulting then in more severe consequences for actions that they may take, or?
Yeah, that's definitely what's resulting in more severe consequences. Police officers are called often, discipline measures are harsher. I also want to name that in schools that have predominantly Black and brown youth, they tend to be more under-resourced in Chicago. And so there's also this structural component. So we can't just blame implicit bias, right? There's a structural component. If you don't have the resource you have an overcrowded classroom, you may not have all of the things that you need to do instructional learning, right? And then you're evaluated around instructional learning as a teacher, and then somebody's being disruptive in your classroom. So there's this other component of our schools needing better funding and resources to be able to address these issues as they come up.
So there's broader inequities across the system, which unfortunately our Black and brown students specifically are targeted and face the issues with more. Okay, thank you. So let's talk about restorative justice a little bit. You've been an advocate for restorative justice practices. What made you be so passionate about it and want to work on this issue for our youth?
So really interesting. I think Alternatives has a really unique way of doing RJ. That's what we call restorative justice because it's a mouthful, right?
Yes.
And so previously, I came on board to Alternatives 5 years ago. Prior to Alternatives, I knew RJ as peace circles or something that happened in the judicial system. And you talked a little bit about the success of the judicial system, right? Using this practice. And when I found out about Alternatives, I learned that we did something where I had never heard of before, and I'd been in the field for about 15 years. And that is that we coach schools, teachers and administrators to use restorative justice practices instead of punitive measures. And I thought that was really interesting because one of the things I've noticed from being in youth development for a really long time is that we try to teach young people how to have better coping mechanisms, how to not be disruptive, but then they're still interacting with the same systems and institutions that create harm. And I have personally mediated conflicts where the teacher was not acting the best in the situation, and the young person had to restrain their feelings and emotions. And so I thought that this was interesting that it looked at an entire institution, being the school that the young person operated within, and said, how can we do better as an institution? How do we set up systems of support so that young people can succeed? And the research, kind of what you talked about, supports that. There is a recent study that University of Chicago Crime Lab just did that not only found better, RJ translates into better behavior for students inside of schools, but it also found lower arrest rates outside of schools. So something is happening when we coach school administrators and teachers that is also translating into better behavior outside of the school.
What do you think that is?
There's so many theories. I think a lot of it can be about one of the aspects of what we do is peer conferencing, where we equip young people with the skills to mediate conflict for their peers. So we think that's one aspect of it. But another thing can be that oftentimes young people are operating in really unsupportive environments. And so if you create that space and they have adults that they can trust, that could also result in better behavior. So just a couple of theories. I think it's a topic worth digging into more, but what we do know is that it works, right?
Why are we so quick to, as society, and there's probably lots of answers to this, but to just quickly rush to the punitive aspect rather than the restorative aspect of addressing a lot of these issues? And I think it's a larger societal issue, right?
I mean, do you have all day?
Yeah.
But I think a lot about it too is how were we handled as kids? We talk a lot about how the folks that are adults today, mental health was still very stigmatized. This bootstrap mentality and individualism was still widely promoted. These ideas of having your feelings validated, talk about your feelings and validate, I think are a lot newer. And so we have raised an entire generations of adults that don't know how to deal with conflict in a constructive manner. And now these adults are responsible for teaching other emerging adults, right? And from children to emerging adults, how to deal with their feelings constructively. So that's my personal theory on what's happening here. But I think we're seeing a huge shift. And I talk about it as an executive director with my Gen Zers coming into the workplace. We're seeing a huge shift in what is expected, how we handle conflict, how we talk about feelings. That I think that us older generations are not used to.
That's so hard, right?
Right.
I'm like, feelings bottle those up. And
Yeah.
I think we're also in a culture, or at least our generation, where we did not do things because we were afraid of the consequences. Like there was that fear mentality rather than like, we did do things because of the love, right? And the framing of it, it's don't steal because you could go to jail because you steal, rather than don't steal because you're taking something away from someone who really needs something, you know. And what I've been reading about RJ is the reframing of the actions for youth, of making them realize they're part of a larger. That their actions not only affect them and the consequences that potentially may be, but they're part of a larger community, and that everyone's so interwoven in that community.
Yeah, but also we forget that young people, like literally your frontal lobe is still developing, right? And I think about some of the things I did when I was younger, and I'm like, the difference between me and some of these kids is that I didn't get caught.
Yeah.
And I know so many folks that have that same story of things that they did and they just didn't get caught. Or they might have done it at a nice little suburb where they were friends with the police officers and they didn't get arrested, right? And so a lot of the infractions that kids are getting locked up for are things that are just kids being kids.
Yeah, and certain kids, especially our Black and brown, are getting in trouble for it, where others may not get in trouble for some of those same things.
Exactly. And I think we saw some of this during the pandemic as well. There was a really huge increase in carjackings in Chicago, right?
Sure.
And some of them did become really serious, but a large chunk of them were being committed by young people under 18. And they weren't selling the cars for parts. They were like dumping a really nice car, and taking another really not so nice car. And a lot of what was happening was pure boredom. They wanted to learn how to drive. They had nothing else to do. And so this is what I mean when I say some of this is just kids being kids, and we're taking away a lot of the opportunities to hang out in Chicago. I know I did a lot of hanging out downtown when I was a teenager, and today, what happens when you see large crowds of kids hanging out in any one place? The police get called. And so there's all these opportunities that young people used to have that are no longer there, and they have to replace it with something.
Thank you. What makes you keep doing this?
The change, I think. It's really cool to see the impact of the work that we do. We have our RJ program, we have our mental health programming, we have now policy and advocacy, and we even train nonprofit leaders on how to do this type of work, right, with an anti-racism lens. And I think the impact is really cool to see the difference in people's lives. And I think that where we're at right now as a society, we cause unnecessary hardship on people's lives, whether it's through these punitive actions, whether it's through having to take on unnecessary debt, whatever it may be. And so being able to make a difference and shift in the right direction, I think is really important to me.
Thank you so much, Bessie. I learned so much about you and alternatives, and thank you for just bringing your passion and love for our youth with us tonight.
Thank you.
Of course. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Hi, I'm Bianca Cotton. On a new episode of Behind the Confident Smile, I'll be sitting in conversation with Nicole Salah Spencer.
It feels good to participate in just the healthy start of families.
Join the conversation Monday on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19 and streaming on cantv.org and CAN-TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
My next guest tonight joined Alternatives 4 years ago as a peace ambassador. He is passionate about pouring his heart into our youth and making an impact and difference in their lives. He believes in RJ because of the impact it has had on his own life. to share his story and his work, I'm thrilled to have with me Joseph McCray, a peace ambassador with Alternatives. Joseph, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I just met with Bessie, and she shared a lot about Alternatives, some of its programming. What I'm curious about is how you got involved with Alternatives.
Okay. I got involved with Alternatives around 2019. I did a program. It was called the RJ Institute. And that was basically a 6-week program where they teach like young people about restorative practices in a 6-week period. During the program, I loved this so much. Like I was very involved in the program. And during that time, I was facing housing insecurity during that time. Like I was in a youth shelter, but I was also in college. So it was a lot to kind of juggle all at once. At the end of the program, I told, the people that were running the program what I was actually facing. And I told them I was in a shelter, and they offered me a part-time position to be a peace ambassador. I'm like, I could do talking circles. I could get paid for it. I'm like, dope. So I started to do talking circles, and I loved it. It's really like fun when you're able to really be yourself in a space. Because a lot of places in Chicago, you can't be yourself. You're not allowed to be yourself. You're not allowed to be vulnerable. And Alternatives was a place where I could be myself. I could be vulnerable, I could be open, and just me. And I love that. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
I love that. Thank you. I have so many questions. And my first question, I think, will be, how did you learn about this RJ Institute in the first place? Actually from my grandmother.
Okay. She used to, so we used to have like a north side location, and she used to live down the street from it. And she called me one day and she was like, you should sign up for this program. You'll get paid for it, and then, give it a shot, sign up for it. And at first I was like, I don't know. I was like, okay, what I got to lose? I joined the program. And I learned a lot about like restorative justice, and I fell in love with the practice because it really just shows you that conflict can be solved in a peaceful way, and you can find a space and a community where you can be yourself without judgment. And the beautiful thing about Alternatives, why I still am here to this day, is that it's people from all different backgrounds, and we love each other. And we uplift each other. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
I love that. And I loved hearing you describe it that way. What do you feel is some of the biggest misconceptions around RJ?
The biggest misconception, I would say, like right off the bat, is that it's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid for punishment. Like if kids go through restorative justice practices, they just gonna take advantage of the practice and they can get away with anything they want. And that's not true. I think restorative justice is more so a different way to handle conflict that's not punitive and based on punishment. Because I feel like when it comes to punitive practices, we see that all over our world. We see like, okay, somebody does something wrong, you punish them. But it doesn't really get to the root cause of the issue. It's just, and I think that's kind of a Band-Aid, because you're not really getting down to the root cause of why something happened or why something occurred. You are just focused on the punishment. This person did a crime, or this person hurt somebody, we need to punish that person. But that doesn't get to the root cause of why it happened.
And I think we've seen how punishments don't always work.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's recidivism or whether it's just creating negativity in relationships, et cetera, et cetera. So I really appreciate you laying that context. Tell me about being a peace ambassador. What does that mean?
So for me, being a peace ambassador is about restoring the communities that you see that have been broken by punitive systems. I can recall like when I first joined, I still currently do this program. It's called Just Us. It's like it's a youth-based program where we get young people to learn restorative justice practices and also be vulnerable. I had it was a young person that was in one of the programs, and he wasn't participating. And for me, I always like to go up to the young people and ask them, like, oh, why are you not participating? Or is like something, are you not having a good day today? And he was like, I just can't relate to what's being talked about. So I changed. So I talked to the person I was working with, and I changed like what we were actually talking about. And I brought up music, because I think music is a big part of like young people's lives. They connect to it. And I'm a music person. So when I changed the directory of like what was being talked about to music, he related. And he was like, oh, I want to come back here. I want to do this program. I want to keep doing this program because I find some relatability in it.
And what's your favorite thing about being a peace ambassador?
My favorite thing about being a peace ambassador is spreading peace and love and positivity to young people, and not just only young people, but to people in my personal life. I think like learning restorative justice practices in the way that I have learned it, I've also applied it to my personal life. I'm in a process of trying to do a talking circle with my family, which I think is gonna be great, because it'll help us like, talk through some things that we have kind of swept under the rug over the years and never really had a conversation about. So I love it.
And it gives, what I'm hearing, please correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes when we have conflict, we let go of things or deal with them inappropriately and allow for them to either fester or snowball and escalate.
I agree. I would say like when we don't deal with conflict in the way it's supposed to be like dealt with, we do internalize it. We do hold things in, and we're not able to be our true selves and express emotions. Because I know for me, like when I was young, my dad, he told me not to cry. You're not supposed to cry. You're a man. You're not supposed to cry. And through that conversation, it took a lot of work. And I thank, restorative justice practices for helping me get through that hurdle. I'm able to express myself more. I'm able to express my emotions. And that was something I wasn't able to do when I was young. So, yeah, that's what I say.
I think I've seen my father cry like twice in my lifetime, and I'm a crier, and it's always been a challenge in navigating that.
Yeah.
How can, if any of our viewers want to become peace ambassadors, how can they do that?
I would say, so alternatives, we have like a website. So the Peace Ambassador program is basically for young people from the ages of 17 and 24 that have like faced housing insecurity or have had a run-in with the judicial system. So if any young people are listening and they fit, they have experienced that, they can go to the website and apply, and then an interview will kind of be, scheduled from there.
You talked about being houseless. Mm-hmm. You talked about navigating that through college. And you talked about different ways that being a peace ambassador and alternatives has positively impacted your life.
Yeah.
If there would be one takeaway or a lesson that you'd wish to share with viewers about how much this journey with alternatives has meant to you, what would that be?
I would say this journey has been beautifully constructed and beautifully inspired and beautifully created by the people that gave me a chance when I was at my lowest point. So yeah, that's what I say.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, your words.
You're very welcome.
It's so clear how important both alternatives and this journey has been for you. And I'm just so excited for everything to come your way.
For sure.
Thank you. We'll be right back with this week's Change in Action.
Hello, I'm Rich Robbins, inviting you to join me for the series Soft and Tender. Soft and Tender celebrates the resilience and emotional depth of Black fatherhood, offering a powerful narrative on family bonds and ongoing challenges faced by Black communities.
As a father and as a parent in general, you have to know that you're not going to always understand, and that's okay.
Tune in on CAN TV, cable channel 19, or stream at cantv.org or the CAN TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
Tonight in Change in Action, meet a Chicago organization that builds community and healing by providing comfortable and affordable accommodation for medical patients and their families throughout their treatment. We are so pleased to spotlight Guest House.
My name is Raimundo Bautista Larios. I am right now a kidney carcinoma cancer survivor, and I'm here to talk about the Guest House. They can provide a room, a place that, right after infusions or any other treatments that you need to have, like I did for a whole year, it gives you a home away from home. Not only that, but amongst other people that are there for lung transplants, I met some other people that are there for heart transplants also. Guest House is a place that you can get that type of help and support. All that care, you'll receive a knock on the door. Hey Ray, good morning, how are you? Those are the things that make a big difference. To know that people are there, that they acknowledge you, that you are there. And those are the great memories that I keep from them. They are open to help anybody that needs help. If they have the space and the capacity to have you there at the Guest House, they will do whatever they can to accommodate you. To see that other people that I've never met can receive you with so much love. It really changed my mind into seeing that there is a lot of great people out there. And to me, I consider Guest House, they're like angels falling from heaven. It makes your mind see that not everything's chaotic, that there's still a lot of hope. You can visit the Guest House at their website, guesthousechicago.org, or you can also call them at 312-996-1167. And trust me, they will answer.
Thank you, Guest House, for providing healing and community to our patients and helping reduce the feelings of isolation that so many of our families experience during their medical crisis. Thank you also to Bessie and Joseph for your passionate, innovative approach in supporting our youth and for being a guiding light to schools, families, and students during their most troubled times. By centering racial equity and providing trauma-informed guidance, you are helping pave the way for our young people to be accountable for their actions while acknowledging the impact of trauma on their behavior to determine how to best respond to their needs. Thank you. Frederick Douglass wrote that it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Our youth are struggling, especially those from impacted and marginalized communities. They need our guidance, they need our support, and when they make mistakes, they need our love and compassion. It is our duty to raise our young men and women to be people of strength and character, and I applaud alternatives for their tireless efforts to transform inequitable systems that target our Black and brown children while offering services of healing and justice that build our children up rather than tear them down. Friends, I hope we can all find ways to support those around us. Let us all be change agents. Thank you, and wishing you a wonderful rest of your evening.